Part of me is like, wow, I can't believe I made these at home. This is why it's my favorite pastry. It's so good. Hey everyone, I'm Claire Saffitz. Welcome to my kitchen. Today I am making my absolute most favorite pastry in the world. It's something called caneles. It's sort of a lesser known French pastry and it's a little hard to describe. I'm very excited to show you. It is like a caramelized, crusty, custardy, delicious, amazing present. I'm so excited to make it. It's a little tricky, but we're gonna give it a go. So caneles, it's spelled C-A-N-E-L and then E accent. That way, E accent. This is a pastry that originated in the French city of Bordeaux, and it is not something you find in lots of bakeries in the US. I think they're becoming a little more common, but it's an item that you might not even notice in the pastry case, and that would be a shame because you should definitely try one if you know there's a French bakery or patisserie in your town and they make them. It is like a tall fluted mini bundt cake, narrow with no hole in the middle. That dark exterior is this like crunchy caramelized coating, and then inside is this just incredibly delicious like vanilla scented custard, and I love them for the texture, for the flavor, and I just love the little package that they come in, the size and everything. These are the molds. So we took a field trip to Bordeaux in culinary school, and I bought these there at like the place where they originated. So it are these little copper fluted molds. This is sort of the classic mold for them. You can find much more easily and less expensive, you can find silicone molds. So that's fine too. Caneles are made from a batter that is very much like a crepe batter or a pancake batter. So the ingredients are very, very straightforward. The principal flavors are vanilla and rum. You could use other alcohols. So ingredient-wise for the batter, I have all-purpose flour, unsalted butter, sugar, whole milk, kosher salt, egg yolks, vanilla bean, you could use extract, and I have dark rum. If you wanted to use like a Grand Marnier or a brandy or a cognac, that's fine. You can do whatever you want. Then for the molds, this is a really important part of the recipe. I have one specialty ingredient, and that is food grade beeswax. Beeswax is really the key to achieving this crusty, crunchy, caramelized exterior on the caneles. So not like 100%, you have to have that to make it. You can just use butter or oil, but that is gonna help you achieve the best results. So check a health food store, farmer's market, or order online. Prior to coating them in that mixture, I also just seasoned the molds, meaning I put a little vegetable oil on them and I baked them at 425 for like 20 minutes, and that helps to ensure that the caneles won't stick. And now I just have them in a low oven, like 250 degrees, to keep them warm, which will make it easier to coat them in that beeswax mixture. So those are just gonna hang out there, and I'm gonna make the batter. So the batter is basically like a crepe batter, a thin pancake batter. So I have 2 cups of milk right here, and I'm gonna put this in my saucepan. And 4 tablespoons of butter. And this is going to make more batter than I will be able to bake in my 6 molds, but I'm just gonna bake multiple batches. This makes around like 3 cups of batter. Okay, then I'm gonna add my salt and my vanilla bean scrapings. So I'm not going to put the bean in. I'll show you what I'm gonna do with that. I'm using an entire vanilla bean because the principal flavor of caneles is vanilla and then rum or whatever alcohol you use. Rum is classic. If you wanna use a half a vanilla bean, that's fine. Obviously they're very expensive, or just extract paste is fine too. If you're doing extract, add the extract at the end. I would say use 2 tablespoons of good quality extract. Wait, did I say tablespoons? I meant teaspoons. Use 2 teaspoons, not tablespoons. So this is gonna go in. The bean I will add in a minute. And I wanna just bring this to a very gentle simmer on the stove. So the butter will melt and then that vanilla will infuse. And then while that heats up, I'm going to whisk my yolks and my sugar. And I'm gonna measure out the rum. This is like a good quality dark rum. Rum is probably my go-to like alcohol of choice for baking. It's just kind of all-purpose. Rum is made from sugar cane, so the flavors pretty much go with like whatever pastry you're making.
What's your go-to for party?
Gin. So I have 3 yolks. These are going to go in this bowl. Then my sugar. At first it will be thick and clumpy like this, but keep working it, and you can use the spatula to clean out the whisk if you need to. And it will loosen up and smooth out, and I want to whisk this until it's kind of pale and thick. It doesn't take very long. It's loosened up and it's quite thick. So you don't want to blanch eggs too early in the process of making a custard, which is basically what I'm making, because it can cook the yolk a little bit, like it will harden the yolk eventually. So my mixture's at a simmer. I'm going to bring that over. This is called tempering the egg. So whenever you're making a custard, which I sort of am, but then I'm adding flour, you blanch the eggs / egg yolks with the sugar, and then you stream in the hot dairy mixture. So if you were to dump it all in at once, you risk cooking the eggs a little bit. And if you need to, you can assist yourself with like a little towel to get a bowl to rest and not spin around. Make it like a little basket. So just stream that in while whisking. Then I'm going to whisk in the flour. Now when you're adding flour to a lot of liquid like this, it does tend to form lumps. So, but we're gonna strain it, so that's okay. But I'm just gonna kind of whisk it in a little bit at a time to break up any lumps. Then the rum, 3 tablespoons. And that's my batter, that's it. So you can see that I'm whisking to incorporate. You don't wanna like whisk a ton because you do not wanna incorporate air into the batter. And that's also why we let it rest for a long time, because air bubbles in that batter is going to contribute to like what I think is the trickiest part of canelé, which is that they might rise out of their molds, and we don't want that. We have to let this batter rest. I'm going to strain it to remove any big flour lumps or any bits of egg, if that's the case. So I have my little strainer and my quart container. So it's this nice fluid batter. I'm mostly straining out flour lumps because adding the flour to all that liquid, like typically the best process is to add wet to dry, and that eliminates lumps. But I'm not trying to get another bowl out, so I just added the dry to the wet, which does produce some lumps. And also maybe like your tempering went awry and you have some cooked bits of egg, that's also what you would be removing. So then just while I'm pressing out any liquid, and then discard those solids. Then I have my clean scraped vanilla bean, which I saved, and I'm gonna stick that into my batter and let it infuse. It's still warm. And this is gonna go into the fridge and rest, ideally at least 12 hours, 24 is better. And then we'll make the canelé. So while that's resting, I'm gonna have a swap, which I'll bring out, but I'm going to grease the molds and show you how to do that. This is food grade beeswax that comes in these like little beads. I have 2 ounces of beeswax and 2 ounces of butter. So I'm going to melt this together, and I'm going to do it in the microwave rather than the stovetop because it's just like a difficult thing to then remove from a saucepan, and the microwave just like makes it a little easier. So equal weights, butter and beeswax. And I just want this to be fluid. And my molds, which I pre-seasoned, meaning I coated them with some vegetable oil and baked them in a hot oven for about 20 minutes until they were smoking. That helps to create a little bit of a non-stick surface so that the canelé hopefully slip right out. So I would say 15-second intervals or so. So this is not 100% melted, but it's warm, so I'm just gonna stir until those last little remaining beads are melted. I am ready to coat my molds. And if I feel like this mixture is cooling off, because it's a little bit cool in here, I will rewarm it, because this does set really fast. And that's partly why I'm keeping my molds warm. If I were to pour this onto a cold mold, it would harden so fast that I would get too thick of a coating. So I'm gonna pull them out of the oven one at a time, and just to make sure they stay warm. And so what I'm going to do is just pour some of this warm mixture into the mold, and then move it around, get all the surfaces coated. So when we fill the molds, we fill almost to the very top. So I want to get every bit that I can coated. That wax and butter mixture has already started to harden inside the molds. So I'm going to pull out the rest of the molds. There's only 4 more, and they'll stay hot for a little while. And I'm going to just sort of fill all of them, dump out any excess wax mixture, and then these get chilled. I have each of the molds coated. It is somewhat of a thin mixture, and I was just feeling the sides to sort of see how much has built up around the sides. Because I want to make sure these release from the molds, I'm going to give it one more coating and try to get it nice and even, but also relatively thick. That will help the canelé to release from the molds, and that's, the advantage of copper is you get that really caramelized exterior. With silicone, you don't get as developed a crust, but they are easier to unmold because it's flexible. So I'm going to pop this back in the microwave and give just sort of another little rinse to each of the molds. I just threw my baking sheet back in the oven, and that is preheating to 450. So we bake the canelé really, really hot, and that's because, again, using the copper molds and that great heat conductor, the outsides of the canelé set really, really fast. I mean, that's ideally what we want, and start to caramelize. And, and that helps to prevent them from rising out of the mold. So I would say the number one sort of difficulty that people have when making canelé at home is that the batter starts to kind of souffle and puff and rises out of the mold. And that has been a problem that I've had in the past when I've tried to make them. So making sure that your oven is really well preheated will at least help you to prevent that. So here on the top of the batter, I have like some foam. I'm going to skim that off because we don't want any air bubbles. So I'm using a spoon, I'm not using a whisk, but I am stirring to reincorporate the batter a little bit. I'm not trying to beat it because I don't want to work in any air, but I'm just stirring because the denser batter, that batter that has the flour is going to sink to the bottom, and I want to reincorporate everything. I had 2 vanilla beans in here because I had one empty, just kind of lying around, and then I had the other one that I scraped. So I'm going to rinse these off because the batter will continue to infuse with the vanilla flavor, but these still have a little more to give. So I'm going to rinse them off and use them to start I'm going to do a little vanilla. So now I'm going to fill the molds, and you want to fill them nearly to the top, but not quite. So I'm going to leave about a 1/2 centimeter of headspace at the top of the mold. So pouring gently, again, not to incorporate any air. I really hope these work, you guys. The second time I made them, I did a batch of 6, and I only had 1 perfect canelé. The other ones tasted fine, they tasted great, they just rose out of the mold a little bit, and so the shape wasn't as nice. Obviously I have batter left over. I'm gonna bake subsequent batches, but I can only do 6 at a time for now. Now I'm gonna bake them at 450 for 15 minutes, and during that 15 minutes, I'm gonna watch really carefully to make sure that I'm not getting any batter. Some rising is normal. It's gonna rise a little bit out of the mold, but you want it to rise straight. If I'm seeing any of the batter rising out and spreading, then I'm going to take it out of the oven, give it a little tap, let it settle, put it back in. So the first 15 minutes is really about getting that batter to set in the molds. Then I'll turn it down to 400 and let it bake the rest of the way. And I'm gonna go until the surface of the batter on the very top is very, very dark brown. Oh, come back here. Okay, so 15 minutes, I have the oven light on. I'm gonna great British baking style, peer into it and just make sure it's going okay. They're starting to bubble around the edges, which is normal. They're not, now they're starting to rise out of the mold. So I'm gonna keep a really watchful eye and make sure that they're not spreading out. Up is okay. If they start to really rise out of the molds, then I'll take them out and, one at a time so they settle. Once you see that bubbling around the sides, that's normal. Don't worry too much. So the 15-minute timer went off. Why this is still ticking. Here. The tops are starting to take on a little bit of color. A couple of the molds have batter that's starting to rise out, but it's rising straight, and at the most I would say there's one that's like a ½ centimeter out of the mold. I'm not too worried at this point, they'll settle down, but I'm gonna keep an eye on them, turn the temperature down, and we're gonna go until they're really, really dark. So I'm gonna pull them out, and I'll let them rest for a few minutes, and then I'm gonna unmold them. You wanna unmold them while they're still hot, then they'll slide out the most easily. Now you can see that the canelés have settled down, as long as it's rising straight up and not out, because if it's straight, they can settle back down into the mold. I'm gonna go one at a time, and let's just hope that they come right out. Yes! I was a little nervous that that wasn't gonna come out. Yes! Here you see, like, this one's a little pale here. These, on the other hand, have this really nice even caramelization everywhere. So that's really what we're looking for. This is common, having some little pale spots where there were maybe like some air bubbles. See, that one's a little blonder. That's one of the ones that rose a little bit, so the bottom wasn't in full contact with the mold. I'm really so excited to eat these. The smell, the aroma as they bake, like you just get so much of that vanilla and rum kind of mixes together, and it's just such an amazing smell. We just have to let them cool, because as they cool and the steam escapes, they are going to form this really crunchy, crusty exterior, and that's like the most important part about canelés. So while I have some variation in the finished canelés on a spectrum from like perfect to like, you know, like shove that one off to the side. Overall, I think it's a really good result, and I've only made these like a handful of times. I can count the number of times on one hand. And this, I think, is my most successful batch. I think there's a couple keys. Hot oven, putting those molds on a preheated baking sheet and making sure your batter is really well rested. And considering this is one of my favorite pastries that I generally opt to buy rather than make myself, it's really like empowering and cool to know that like I can make these at home myself. I'm like, I'm gonna make these more now. So I'm gonna cut one in half. Nice, this looks really good. So it has a little bit of like this webbed interior because there was all that moisture loss. So it's not like a solid custard like you would, you know, if you're eating creme brulee. And it has that flour in there, so there's some chew to it. I'm happy to see in this cross section, you'll get some air pockets and everything, that's normal. But what I don't have is like one big, you know, like whole air bubble in the middle. That can happen sometimes if like the baking is off a little bit. So this is nice. I think the level of doneness is also perfect. Okay, so I'm gonna give it a taste. It smells so good. That really dark, crunchy exterior with all that sort of like caramelized dairy and sugar. It, in the best way possible, it reminds me of like toasted marshmallow. It's just like the perfect amount of doneness and caramelization. Plus it's, what I love is like the scent. It's all that vanilla and rum. If you're on the fence about splurging on vanilla bean, like this is the time to do it. It's so good. So if you go to your local bakery and you see these like little lumps of like brown whatever, and you don't know what it is, order it. You will not regret it. It's so delicious. For my money, the greatest pastry there is. Thank you for watching Dessert Person. It was really fun to make these. I can't wait to make more. And don't forget to like and subscribe.